I have a classical music problem. We need to talk. Over the years, I've got to like so much music that I didn't at first enjoy that I assumed my issues with atonalism were my own problem and that one day atonalism would make sense to my ears. But it still doesn't, and I've reached the point in my life when I realise it probably never will. This is my articulation of that problem, and it's coming in the form of 4 complaints which will develop, I believe, from the weakest to the strongest. Firstly, a quick primer. Atonalism, or serialism as it's more strictly known, was developed as a music system at the start of the 20th century, principally by Schoenberg, in a deliberate attempt to subvert the harmonic system Western classical music had developed over the last few hundred years. Serialism asserted that every one of the notes in the chromatic scale needs to be played before repeating any other one. It's a rule which prevents any harmonic basis or gravity to the music. When you play in a certain key, certain notes always have harmonic preference over others. But with serialism, the preferences are abolished. No repeats are allowed till all the notes are played, preventing the music from ever having any kind of harmonic centre whatsoever. Which brings me to my 4 grumbles. I should say right from the outset that none of these complaints involve "it sounds horrible." It does, still to me. But so did a lot of other music from the Renaissance or other modern music, even a lot of late romantic music. They all sounded horrible to my ears until I learned to love them. Look at the example of our taste buds. We have flavour receptors to warn us of the dangers of food, bitter receptors there to spot poisonous substances, sour receptors to warn us about the ripeness, and yet we enjoy bitter and sour foods. We have learnt to game our own safety systems for the pursuit of pleasure. And I think we do the same thing with music. We can take pleasure from the sound of discordant music. So, bad as atonal music does sound to my ears, let's leave "it sounds bad" aside and begin with my first and admittedly weakest complaint. I can appreciate that people enjoy atonal music. As I've already said, the discordant can be fascinating to our senses, but we already have discordant music. Modern 20th century classical music covers discordance for me. If I want music that sounds discordant, and I think I've been saying discordant too many times, I'd prefer to listen to Shostakovich or Bartok than proper atonal composers like Webern or Schoenberg. Okay, I accept this is my weakest argument, so let's dive a little deeper. Many years ago, I was involved in a conversation with a contemporary artist who was complaining about someone had done something with shop dummies, which honestly I can't remember now, but he was really annoyed because he had been thinking about doing something similar with dummies, but now he couldn't because the idea had been taken. This obsession with being new and original has just created so much bad art. Nowadays, we have a much more relaxed idea about novelty. We create new things by mixing 2 old things or trying to put a different spin on something familiar. We're no longer obsessively just trying to come up with something totally unique. Unless, of course, you want to create a pile of serialism in its bones, in its DNA, is obsessed with this idea of having to create the new and original. That is the point behind destroying the harmonic system, giving composers an original and opposing musical system that forces them to create something unusual and new. Now, that might have looked great 100 years ago, but honestly, now I think that's a busted aesthetic. We want to see original work, not unique things. Let me put this in terms of Beethoven. Beethoven's Eroica Symphony is new and original and revolutionary because Beethoven needed expanded new musical forms to achieve his ideas, not because he was trying to be original. Great composers needed to find new ways to express ideas, and that's not the same thing as just creating something new. Okay, rant over, but leading to my third and deeper critique. It always feels wrong when music needs to be explained to be understood. Art can appeal to our head or our heart, our minds or our instincts. There's a spectrum here. There's culture that will appeal more to our intellect, like books, and culture that goes straight for our emotions, like music generally. Atonalism, however, sits at the brainy academic side of this spectrum. It cannot just reach you intuitively. You have to have an understanding of the music that preceded it in order to appreciate it. In other words, you can just appreciate Baroque music or Renaissance music on its own terms. But to appreciate atonalism, you need to understand the harmonic system that existed before it. Serialism is not a system that can just operate on its own. It needs a harmonic structure to destroy, to create itself, which means it presupposes knowledge in order to appreciate it, which makes it a rather academic and, I'm afraid, uninstinctive way to enjoy music. I can see how it attracts the head, but not the heart. It's non-intuitive and its effects on me feel non-emotive, and that has always been a huge issue for me. I can hear it, but I have never felt it. Which leads me to my final, and I think most biting criticism. Serialism is a rigid system, and I think this is really my greatest problem with it. It seeks to break free from a system by imposing an even more incredibly rigid system of its own. And I mean incredibly rigid. Musicians of the world, free yourselves, untie your chains. All notes are equal to all other notes. You hate your bourgeoisie music? Well, have I got a revolutionary idea for you. A great new system to free us from our shackles, which, surprise, surprise, just imposes an even more rigid system. By all means create atonal music, but to systematize that with serialism is just bringing in more rules. I really don't see how that frees anyone. Proper atonal serialist music is the opposite of what it claims to be. Rather than freeing a composer, it puts him in a different prison, and a much smaller prison with more chains. Which is why I believe serialist atonal music is destined for the museum or academia, and not, I'm afraid, for the concert hall. Am I correct? Well, a rough estimate would say that 20% of all performed music comes from the 20th century, from modernist music, but barely 1% is actually serialist music. I don't particularly like it, and neither do audiences. Like I say, I can totally appreciate that other people can enjoy atonalism, but serialism as an aesthetic system, I'm afraid it adds nothing for me. Sorry. Please don't like and subscribe.